In my intermediate painting class, our final assignment was to create a series of paintings, which each one would inform the next one in the series. And they had to develop a common theme or idea. So, in my past art classes, I had been exploring themes related to deconstructing and reconstructing the body, which was sort of a way for me to explore how I felt about my body and how it presents itself to the world. So, I wanted to, for this project, explore agency regarding my body. Most of the time, I feel as if I lack agency and cannot make independent choices about how my body is seen throughout society. My body, trans body, is very difficult for some people to process, and so labels and descriptions have always been sort of imposed on me against my will. This, can include just misgendering, uncomfortable questions, and occasionally just blatant disrespect. It's all just unfortunately part of the package. And all of this just made me incredibly angry. And so I wanted to channel that anger into the first piece I made. Sort of a spit in the face and a punch in the gut to everyone who acted as if my body, my gender, my identity was for public consumption instead of private consideration. So, to begin my brainstorming, I looked back on art history, specifically at these sort of medieval paintings and depictions of angels. Really liked the images where the angels looked inhuman almost, just sort of a mass of wings, sometimes a head and eyes, sometimes many eyes. It's no wonder that biblical characters were said to be afraid of them. This was a pretty direct contrast to how I had seen angels in paintings and drawings and pictures like that. Sort of depicted as these perfect beings that looked very much like us, except for maybe wings and a halo. And it made me wonder how artists and how people in general will change things to fit into their personal view. I could definitely relate to that as a trans person, and how people sort of impose their own views on how you should look, how you should act. I think everyone can sort of relate to that in some way. I also looked at some contemporary artists who expanded this idea of this inhuman look of angels. Here's an example by Dan Hillier. So I started with plenty of sketches before I began to actually put my paintbrush onto wood. And I experimented with the imagery and the composition of the general piece. I knew starting out that I wanted a prominent circle in my paintings, a sort of a reference to all these, golden halos in medieval art over all of these angels and saints. Other topics I explored in my research were votives, Italian street shrines, and cathedrals. These were sort of inspired by my summer archaeological trip to Italy, where I got to see a lot of these things in real life. So the first painting I did, it is aptly titled Celestial Bodies, Part 1, was a merging of all these ideas into sort of a mythological narrative. So when you look at the painting, the shrine at the very base is offering a votive, or a severed hand is what I'm using to, illustrate this votive, to this divine angelic being, this sort of deity. So at the tops of the top and sides of the painting, you can see the expressive hands of this deity or this angel, showing three main things: a sword of righteousness, or in this case, a knife, a scathing obscenity, and the wick of one of the candles being put out. I imagined that the base of this painting, where this shrine is located, the very bottom, was everyone who fundamentally does not understand trans or gender non-conforming people, that they was sort of set up this shrine, and they offer this votive, a severed hand, to sort of quote-unquote heal the individual of their identity. And the flaming circle of hands was this angel or deity that they were appealing to, but instead of bowing to their worshippers' wishes and saying, that they are right in their, considerations towards this person, this deity, this angel, is putting out the candle and brandishing their knife, and it's essentially saying, screw you, which is what I wanted to say. I wanted to twist the narrative of devout Christians praying to their God to sort of change trans people, asking for God to heal us, that there's something wrong with us. And they think that they're healing these people, but really they're only causing more harm and damage. So I incorporated a lot of different textures within this painting, particularly with the angel itself. The wings were done with taking like a palette knife and scooping up thick blobs of acrylic paint and sort of slathering it on this panel. And the inner circle was done by watering down some yellows and blues and white paint and pouring it into this sort of taped off contained area, and it allowed the colors to mix and swirl together, and I thought this looked pretty whimsical and kind of mystical. I used these sort of texture techniques to try to make the angel really stand out against this more or less flat background, which is sort of exploding into the world. So I used this painting, this first painting, along with like the techniques and subject matter to inform my next piece, or titled Celestial Bodies Part 2. I did not have my second painting planned out until I was nearly done with the first one. That is how I, approached this project, so that the things that I would learn from the very first painting are what I would bring to the second painting. So for the second one, I decided to let the angry angel sort of calm down a bit, and focus less on the outsiders, the ones who are being harmful, the ones who would be setting up this shrine and putting out these candles and setting out this grisly votive, and focus on this grisly votive, on this severed hand. What is this hand? What does it mean? And I really took it as being symbolic of all these trans people that others thought should be healed. And because of that, I wanted something more gentle and loving. So the angelic hands in the second piece, they're tempered. They hold the severed hand with tenderness and love. They're stitching it back up again. This is my intent here was validation. This is saying who you are is okay, and it never needed to be fixed in the first place. Looking at the backgrounds of both of these pieces, the background in the second painting is different than the one in the first painting, where it was a starry night of a painted ceiling, which was inspired by the painting ceilings of cathedrals, particularly of my old church in Lakewood, St. James Church. And in the second one, it looked more like the sun was rising. So it was a difference between nighttime and now a sunrise. The light is sort of being let in again, there is a progression of time of moving forward, metaphorically speaking. So some criticisms of these pieces I received was about the complexity of subject matter and metaphors, which I admit myself, I have quite an awful lot going on, especially in the first one. And if you don't fully maybe understand my perspective or what I'm trying to do with the symbols, you might not get the message at all. And that's a very valid criticism. And that is why the more simplified message of the second painting, I think, makes it a stronger piece as a whole. It's a little bit more direct. The mood, the emotion, it's a lot easier to read. And I'm pretty proud of that. And that is also what I used to, what I learned from the first painting to inform the second painting. After looking at the first painting and seeing how I had sort of gotten very wrapped up in my own my own mythological narrative of what I wanted this piece to be and say, and it felt like it should include everything, when really focusing on a small chunk of it, I think, made it more direct and impactful. So looking at the successes of these pieces, one is just their size. They are 4 feet tall and 2 feet wide. I was not certain that I was going to be able to do pieces this large. I have never done that before, and so I consider that a success in it of itself, just for the sheer size of these. They're not exactly life size because they're only 4 feet, but they're nearing to that point, and that's pretty cool. Among other successes are the vibrancy and the colors. These paintings really catch your eye, and I think that they make people want to know more about what's going on and the sort of the meaning behind it, and it makes for a really thoughtful and engaging piece. And the colors only really enhance to that experience. So looking at these paintings, like, I have some future plans for them, and I intend to make a third one, which will be as equally informed on both of the paintings as the second one was for the first one. I learned through both my failures and successes of these paintings, and I can use that knowledge to create the third and final piece of this series, which I want to take in an even more uplifting direction, where the first one was pretty spiteful, the second one was a little bit tender, and I think I would like the third one to be joyous, which feels like the more obvious conclusion to this narrative of being hurt, healing, and thriving. I'm using these pieces as a sort of base for the work I'm exploring right now in my senior studio, as well as my independent film study, both of which draw upon the ideas that I experimented with these paintings, such as the prominent circle and the images of spirituality. Together, along with the pieces from my past classes and the work I'm doing now, they make an overall cohesive body of work that I'm pretty proud of. Thank you.